So recently I came across the fairly new term Deconstructed Club. Deconstructed Club is apparently a new genre label that's being attached to underground electronic music that's sort of pulling apart the idea of, techno and electronic dance music and recontextualizing it into a more forward-thinking and futuristic approach to the sound. It got me thinking about genre labels and where exactly do we come out with these ideas into subcategorizing every form of music into pretty pretentious labels for the most part. I mean, I'm not exactly talking about, hip hop, jazz, electronic, rock, metal. Like, they're obviously all standard genres of music. It's pretty clear that each of those genres of music I just said sound completely different from one another, even if maybe some of them influence each other, but generally they're a pretty much solid standard for what the type of music that they each entail. But it seems to be this sort of like elitist attitude within music nerd communities, in this idea that we have to, subcategorize everything. And of course, every artist has its own place in music, but when you start coming out with genres such as intelligent dance music and deconstructed club, it just kind of gets a bit far. Art pop as well is another one. Experimental, insert genre to decide what you think is experimental because of very, specific reasons that make something experimental and something else not. I'm not trying to put the argument forward that genres don't exist, but I'm just trying to discuss this idea of what exactly these labels do. I mean, these are only labels for the people within the know. Of course, art pop might be a separate genre from just pop music, but outside of music communities, if you said, oh, this artist is an art pop artist, you'd sound like a pretentious dick. What exactly makes something art genre? Like, why do we have to separate pop and art pop? Like, why is art pop art pop? Am I being too pernickety with meanings and labels being thrown onto pieces of music? Possibly, but that's the thing. These labels are thrown onto the piece of music. I don't really think an art rock or an art pop artist or band would really come out and say, yeah, we're art pop, we're just so artsy and our pop music is so much above everything else that's in the pop world right now. It probably is, because pop in the current day isn't really looking too great right now, but it still adds this sort of elitism, this idea that this genre is above this genre because it's considered artsy, even though anyone in making music is probably artsy. I mean, why would Carly Rae Jepsen be less art pop than a Clarence Clarity? They're very different sounding artists that make very different music, but at the end of the day, when I listen to those artists, they both sound pretty pop induced to me. It's very catchy, it's very hook driven. Why is one art and one isn't? This goes again for hip hop. Like, a lot of artists are considered experimental, but why are you throwing this experimental word onto certain genres of music? I think anyone in a genre of music can be experimental. It just depends on how you perceive it. Sure, a clipping is very different to Freddie Gibbs. They're very different. They're both considered rap, hip hop, but at the same time, clipping has a bit more of an experimental approach. But I feel as though it's only these labels that get thrown onto these artists, as opposed to Davy Diggs coming out and saying, yeah, we make experimental hip-hop music. Essentially what I'm getting at here is that I just don't really like this idea of demeaning other art when all it really is just different forms of music. I think these subcategories end up adding nothing to the conversation other than, well, I listen to this experimental type artist, so this type of music is above less experimental type stuff. And believe me, this exists. You just have to find certain types of areas to go on the internet, you know, certain corners of Reddit. You'll find this kind of attitude just so easily. People can be so overt about it as well, like with the idea that certain artists are more artful because of the way they make their music, and some artists are considered less artful, and it just doesn't really do anything, I don't think. Sure, there's an argument to be made that the music is better from certain artists, but these labels that get thrown on, especially like Deconstructed Club, all I hear when I hear Deconstructed Club is all club music is trash, and I'm gonna throw this label onto these artists because they're doing it in a more artistic way. This isn't just dancing in the club type music, this is experimental club music. When I hear IDM, I think this is better than electronic dance music because this is more focused, this is more experimental, it's intelligent. And that's not to say that everyone thinks that way, but there is definitely a percentage of people out there that do think that way, and that's exactly where I'm coming from with this entire video. Because at the end of the day, technically anyone can be experimental with art. You know, Shawn Mendes could go in the studio and try something he's not tried before. It might sound like shite, and it might come across as just a straightforward, ordinary pop song, but for him, he might have been experimenting with his talents, his styles, his songwriting, you know what I mean? It just adds this unnecessary attitude to me that I just don't really think we really need. I just think it would be so much better if we just kept, you know, genres kind of as basic as possible, as straightforward as possible, to get rid of this idea of some genres are more artistic than others. We don't need that. I'm not trying to say we need to abolish genres. Genres are staple, you know, we need them to differentiate everything in the music world. Same with films, honestly. You need genres in those kind of films, but I feel like films have got it down to a T, you know. You know what's a comedy, you know what's a drama, you know what's a crime film, you know what's a horror film. Like, there isn't really anything else other than that. And sure, art has no boundaries, but when you take it to the point where anything can be like everything, and everything can be fucking anything, it just gets so over the top and so unnecessary with all these attached ideals thrown onto artists that maybe don't consider themselves any of the things that we seem to consider because we listen to it. And sometimes as well, scrolling through Rate Your Music, and you come across a random artist that you haven't heard before, and you just see all these random labels being paired next to this same artist or this one album, and it's like, does this album honestly have all of these 25 genres in the one album that you're talking about here? Really? Just scroll through the Deconstructed Club genre on Rate Your Music. We've got fucking Sophie, Andy Stott, Lotic, Arca, Rabbit, Aisha Devi or Devi, friggin' Amnesia Scanner, and Death Grips. I mean, you may not have heard of all those artists there, but if you've heard at least some of them, you can probably recognize that none of these artists sound anything alike. It's really the same as IDM as well. You get John Hopkins, Ortega, Aphex Twin, Flying Lotus, Border Canada. None of these artists have anything to do with each other. Like, there are barely any similarities in the music that they make. And to me, it just feels pointless throwing this label onto any of them. They're just electronic artists at the end of the day. Sure, it might sound like I'm being really pernickety and nitpicky here, but to me, these genre labels themselves are pernickety and nitpicky. They're just they're just thrown onto these artists that have an electronic approach to their music, but it's intelligent or it's artistic, so we're gonna throw it onto these ones. It's different to Chainsmokers or Calvin Harris, so these ones are intelligent and smart. Obviously, they're better than friggin' Calvin Harris and Chainsmokers. I mean, well, subjectively, that would be how you'd look at it, but the point still stands. The genre label isn't helping, I don't think, in any way. Especially in the modern day as well. Like, you don't really need to be a certain fan of specific music anymore. I do think it's safe to say that genres are starting to become blurred though. Like, there isn't really an archetype for a punk head anymore, or like a metal head, or a hip hop head. Like, yeah, sure, there will be hardcore fans of these genres, but most people listen to anything. Like, there isn't really a strict sort of archetype these days. You get it a lot as well on YouTube with these like rock music fans reacting to hip hop and like metalheads reacting to this rap song, this R&B song. And by the end of the video, they're like, hey, that was a good rap song. So you've just proven to us all that you're actually not a metalhead, are you? Anyway, before I get too rambly and keep ranting on and on and on, I'll just kind of leave it at that. What do you guys think of genres and the idea of labels being thrown around in such a very specific way? And not only that, but a sort of pretentious type of way as well. But if you completely disagree, I'd love to see why you disagree in the comments and all your thoughts about all of this. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a bit rambly, I must admit, but I hope you got some enjoyment out of it. What do genres mean? What do labels do? Tell me. Tell me. Have a good day. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. Goodbye.